Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. My name is Elizabeth Schwartz. Welcome to the milestone 25th Miami Jewish Film Festival, the world's largest festival of its kind. While we are sorry to be having our second virtual festival, we are so grateful for all of our members and our sponsors, our community partners, all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsors, SAGE, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education, and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for their continued support throughout all of these years. I'm really excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with director Bernadette Wegenstein and the producer Annette Porter from the film The Conductor, which is premiering at this year's festival. Bernadette is from Austria, which makes perfect sense when you've seen the film and you see them in Austria. And of course, the love of classical music. She's an author and a documentary filmmaker living in Baltimore. She's a professor at Johns Hopkins University, and her films and books bring together her feminist thought and her interest in human-centric storytelling. She's the recipient of numerous academic, film, and Austrian governmental awards. Probably you're going to get an Australian governmental award soon too. Annette Porter is the producer of The Conductor, and she, in addition to her passion for photography and documentary films, she is the director of the Saul Zaentz Innovation Fund at Johns Hopkins University. She's directed and produced work in arts and social justice, and she spearheads social entrepreneurship through film, awarding grants and galvanizing industry support for young filmmakers. So thank you both so much for joining us today. As I mentioned when we were chatting before, I thought this film was amazing. I'm sure all of our audience who saw it was just really moved by it, and it's sold out screenings and lots of buzz and being included. I mean, did you expect that? Did you expect this film to be in like films not to miss? I mean, did you see that coming?
I mean, I don't know what to say. Actually, I didn't, I mean, I don't know if this is the right moment to say, but today we actually just won an award from the Naples Film Festival, where we were just at last weekend, and, it got the Art in Focus Award. And I only just now saw that it was, running against narrative feature films as well. So no, the answer is
that's amazing.
Thank you. So I did not expect all this attention and this recognition for the film, because I was like for years in this bubble with, our editor and with Annette. And I guess, I'm just waking up now and realizing, sorry, I think my screen might have frozen for a second. Anyway, I'm back. So Annette, how about you? Maybe she did.
I too am surprised, because we're not surprised, but I wasn't anticipating it. Again, with like Berna, we've been so focused on making the film and talking and immersed in this, the developing of the storyline and watching it come to life, that you don't really think about the audience and what the reaction is going to be in the beginning of it. Although it's been really wonderful to hear from audience that they do love it, and that we certainly have been moved by the film, and it's lovely to hear that the audience is at the same time. That's incredibly rewarding, I think, for both of us.
So exciting. I was so moved by how, when you never think of a conductor. I mean, I love the Maya Johnson. I'm looking at my notes from the film, who she said she was doing the Skype instruction. And she said, your film shows how conductors learn. And I love that Maya said, that even for her, practice was shrouded in mystery, right? So how important was that for you to kind of try to animate how conductors learn, how they practice?
So I really like this first question, because it shows me how closely you looked at the film. And that is also one of my I wouldn't say, definitely from some of the side characters, one of my favorite lines, when you see her conducting and then she says, I'm still wondering, and she looks into the sky, she's like looking in the computer. She says, I'm still wondering, how does a conductor actually practice, right?
And so she herself is learning, how do I learn, right?
I know. And so that was one of our, I knew I wanted to have that line in. And so we needed to get there and let her do a bunch of things, which is, what you see in the film. And we really decided to put the art of conducting as this mysterious art in the film for audiences to also learn what it really took for Maren to be engaged, not just in any discipline that is outside of her reach as a woman, but then in this particular discipline that is even, so hard to describe and to learn, because as she says, you don't have an instrument very easily. Your instrument is the orchestra for a conductor. And so if you don't have that instrument, then how are you going about it? And I was fascinated by this sort of secret art. And we definitely decided very, very consciously and very structurally to bring it back to that throughout the film, whether it's a class she teaches or she teaches young women individually, on the computer. And of course, we see her also perform the art of conducting. And then we have the Bernstein clip. What does a conductor do? Yeah. So I think all of this helps, to bring out a really hidden art form.
Yes, and Bernadette, you always had the vision of making this thing that was invisible visible, and I loved that, and I loved watching you actually come up with the ideas for how to do that, and the connection between the conductor and the musicians is so strong, but it's invisible. Mm-hmm. And I really think that the way you constructed the shots, you're starting to show that kind of almost electricity that goes between them.
Absolutely.
I feel like the first line of the film was Maren saying conducting is connecting or something, right? Which was such a beautiful way to set the stage. And I was fascinated by the fact that you're Bernadette, a linguist, because I loved how the travel, right, in the film. You all went all over the place, and I think there was like the Brazilian harpist who I was thinking, how does anybody understand what she's talking about? I mean, first of all, Portuguese is amazing, but then I loved how the Brazilian harpist said, like, I understand her language, I understand her gestures, I understand what she's saying, I feel comfortable. So how did you capture that throughout all these nations and?
Well, I mean, one advantage I have is that I speak all the languages that you see in the film. And, as a linguist, my first degree was really in all the Romance languages. And so I speak all of them. And Maren will tell you, she's always very proud of that when she looked at the calendar with me where she's going. And I said, okay, I'm going here and here. And she said, I was able to navigate those cultures very well. So I think that is an advantage as a documentarian, to go where you can speak the language. And in Austria, not only the language, but also knowing the culture, being born there. Because Austria, it wasn't easy to produce at the Concerthaus at the opening, debut concert. And Annette was there. And, but even some of the shots that are in the film, if I hadn't just told some of the people, come on, like, let me go up to this building and take a few shots from there, why not? In Viennese, I don't know if we would have had this access, but as to this question of, well, how did you get her to say Luba? Those and again, you're a linguist too, clearly, because those are some of my favorite lines, because the way that we also paste them, os gestos, and and when she lists it, we intercut that with the music with Rimsky-Korsakov, and she, the harpist, had just given us this amazing drum, and then we stop at this close-up of the harp and of the strings. You see that they're still vibrating. Mm-hmm. This is all completely timed and and very consciously interwoven. Mm-hmm. And everybody who says anything in the film about Maren talks about connection. in one or another way. And that was important to us. We didn't want to just put in any experts who say things about her, but only things that are pertinent to this, again, art of conducting. And the fact that she then said, I feel comfortable with her conducting because I understand her, that exactly brought it home to the question of the language, the hidden language. And so I think how we get anybody you see on the screen as documentarians is you have long interviews with many people and you go with your intuition, this might be a good person or not, but the interviews take a long time. I interviewed her during before the concert, after the concert. This, by the way, is afterward. And a lot of others that didn't make it in. So it's then a question really of transcribing and looking for what you need.
One thing I also really love about that clip is I think it subconsciously anyway demonstrates one of the real importances to having diversity in the conducting, is that here's a female looking at a female conductor, and it increases the comfort level. And we have other females saying it's really in Austria saying it's really important to see this example up there, to see women, to see people of color conducting.
Absolutely. So there's a certain casting, behind who makes it in as well. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's so sad, isn't it, that there's that still no one has achieved the heights that Marin Alsop has subsequent to her, right? I mean, I just was reading how she stepped down, from the Baltimore Symphony, and she remains the only. I mean, it's so heartbreaking. I do you hope that this film is seen by others and maybe it impacts, maybe makes some change?
Yeah, I do think so. It will. I mean, I think that the film, because it's entertaining also for people who are not in the arts necessarily. I do think that there's a certain awareness that is being made with the film. But the other thing that we really tried to emphasize on in the structure of the film was that she has paved the way and that she's given back what she never received. So I do think that this generation after her now, has it easier, and you see more women actually in symphonies coming up, and soon probably there will be another woman, in a major symphony. I do think it's going to happen, and whether our film is important enough to have triggered that, I'm not sure that I would take the credit, but I think it's time that takes the credit and progress. But what is important, I think, in this film for us was to show the pioneership and the hard work paving the way to make change happen. And the change doesn't really happen within the same generation. It takes another generation to really bring it somewhere else, and probably even another one, like the little girl says at the end, if Marin can do it, I can do it. Yes. So it probably takes 2 generations, and I think that's where we put the focus in, not only showing her life story, but also focusing on what is she giving back to the next generations.
And that Orchids is amazing. So you both live in Baltimore. Like, this film must be so beloved by the community in Baltimore, and in no small part, I'm sure, because of showing this incredible program that seems to have massive impact on lots of kids who are unrepresented typically in these orchestras.
The Orchids program is really fantastic. And we haven't had our premiere here in Baltimore yet. We'll be doing that in December, and Orchids will be featured there. Oh. So they're going to come and play, and Marin will be there, and Bernadette and I. So we're sort of anticipating a bit of a love fest there. But those kids are delightful and really now making huge progress.
Yeah. It's incredible. How over what period did you film this? Did you shoot?
So the film took all in all 4.5 years to make. And so you take about a year to really, research it. I also sat in on one entire art of conducting class, really master class, that Marin was teaching at the Peabody before I ever even started filming anything there. And I went to every week's class and I took notes, And I took music lessons at the Peabody to be able to study the scores and really understand what they were doing. That took time. Filming about 2 years, and post-production, I would say 1.5 years, because editing took a really long time until we got it right. And then you go through several iterations, and you have to take a step back, and you have to have great advisors and note takers. And by far, from the films I've made until now, this was, thanks to Annette, the best post-production process for the film, because she was able to get such helpful notes, and she was able to give her notes to Stefan and me in the edit. It's a very tricky process. It's very hard to describe with anything else that I actually know. You're so deep in it, and you don't see left and right anymore. And anything that anybody tells you about it is sort of annoying, because you are in there. And so as a filmmaker, Annette knows, how that feels. And so even though she also saw the film many times in every iteration, but she had a little bit more of a distance so that she could have a clear mind, and brought in incredible notes from experts, who are world famous editors. And so that was really, I would say, probably one of my favorite moments of making the film is making those decisions editorially to see how the film was getting better and better. But to go back to your question, it takes a long time.
And you did a lot of this during the pandemic, the post-production work?
Yep.
You actually managed to be creative in the pandemic. That's fantastic.
I think our last shoot was right as things were shutting down, wasn't it? So we were quite lucky.
For sure. And really, I mean, you nailed it there. I took full advantage of that pandemic. And, I also, as a professor here, I have a lot of responsibilities, and I have 3 children. So I have a very busy life, and being able to just focus on editing for, a long stretch of time was definitely invaluable and helpful. Yes.
I was wondering how much you knew about symphony kind of coming into this, and you shared that you took you're so multilingual that you also took a symphony language class. So it sounds like you had maybe you already were informed, but you took it to the next level so that you could really be.
That's exactly what happened. So I do think that, I want to share the fact that my grandparents were classically trained musicians, and my grandfather was an opera singer and my grandmother a pianist. But this was the Nazi era when they were young, and they weren't able to succeed really in their professions. I mean, there were maybe 2 discs that my grandfather produced, and I grew up with this awareness of this high art, and an art that was never really able to come to full fruition, perhaps, by my mother and the way she brought me up. But that meant going to hear a lot of music, and she was very knowledgeable about the music. And for her, the music was also a way to stay close to her parents. So my love of classical music and my knowledge is definitely also biographically conditioned. And I learned the piano, but not very well. I mean, yes, I studied it from like 5 to 20, so I definitely know how to play it. And but I didn't ever, I didn't become a real classically trained musician or anything like that. But again, the love of this music also led me to ask my children to learn an instrument at the Peabody Institute here. And actually their music theory became so strong that I ended up asking them sometimes about certain things in the scores to help me out there. Great. So I definitely have,
it's a real family enterprise.
Have a relationship to the music that is very personal. Yeah.
And what about you, Annette? Did you have a relationship to symphony before you took this project on?
I certainly had a relationship to music, and like Berna, studied piano from 5, and music was a very important part of my family's upbringing and studying music. And we all of my brothers and I, we all had instruments and it was seen as an important part of education.
Mm.
And I have a love of both opera and classical music. But I'm also not classically trained. So it was a learning experience for me, the nuance, and it's been fun actually understanding why I love it so much, because some things I just knew in my heart, and now I understand intellectually why there's some of my love there.
Mm.
And I should add that Stefan Fauland, our editor, he is a classically trained violinist.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. How is Marin as a subject? I mean, it's got to be hard to relinquish control and to let your story be told. Were there things that she was like, you got to put that in there, or don't put that in there, or?
Yeah, she was.
Yeah.
Definitely. So it's a long journey, and it all ended really well, but it wasn't always easy. I would say that, Marin opened up slowly, but she's a very deep and very loyal person. And so once she opens up, she really gives you her, her inner life, but it took a while. And she actually did not want to have the Baltimore, the BSO story in the film at the beginning.
You have to, yeah.
And and we never said you have to, but it was, in the end, she came to me and said, I'm ready for it now. So it was also a matter of waiting and being there for her to get ready and open up. But yes, I think she was, at the beginning, she was a little bossy and would say, and would tell the stories in a way that she was maybe more used to from like a journalistic interview. And that's actually when Annette stepped in and immediately, listening to it, said, it would be good to ask her completely different questions so that she gets out of the habit of telling certain stories and getting her to tell them differently. So we worked on that really hard. Right, Annette?
Yeah, it's tricky for people in the public because they're very used to delivering a story. And so what was lovely is to see Berna's relationship grow with Marin and the trust level grow so that they could get beyond the sound bites that are delivered elsewhere into the real story, to the real conversations. And that trust did grow. And so a lot of the filming that you do in a documentary, when you're telling someone's story, a lot of the things that you might do in the beginning are not used as much as the ones in the end. But you can't get to the end without having gone through the whole journey. So it's a really lovely process, and that building of trust is key.
So interesting. I mean, yeah, it sounds like the unfolding took time, but that it was clearly, we see the result, and she's so vulnerable and honest, and I think the way you told the BSO story was great, because you had all those different voices, so you see all these different perspectives, and the journalists covering it at the time, and you had all that footage, so that was great.
It's not easy for Marin to watch the film, even so.
Really?
No, we were just together at the Austrian embassy watching it, and I think, she did open up to Berna, but now seeing it on a big screen, it's not easy to see yourself so vulnerable.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So,
yeah, I can imagine.
Absolutely. But she does say that it is authentic and that she's sort of happy that it was told and that it's out there. So I think for her, it was also a process that she embraced and that she's happy with, which is very important for us as filmmakers, because, it would be terrible any other way. And it happens. So it's not uncommon, that your subject isn't happy.
Of course, right. It's not necessarily like a sacrificial offering at their altar. I mean, you're telling a story, and they're maybe not going to love every piece of it.
The other thing I got to say is that she, as an artist, when she did make some suggestions and some, editorial suggestions, she actually really gave us the last word. She wasn't imposing. She was suggesting certain things. For instance, there's the Japanese businessman Tomiotaki, who helped her out, and he gives this great speech about his opinion about, equality and difference, and he says, if you're white or black or Oriental, it doesn't matter. And so he said this word Oriental, and Maren said, oh, this is really, did he really say this? And should we use this word? And I said, in the flow of how he says it, it's part of his speech. And we don't read it as viewers as racist, because it is what he said authentically. He's also of a certain age, so he uses this word. He himself is originally Japanese. And so she was at first a little unhappy about the fact that I didn't cut that out, but I think she respected my choice, because I'm not, I didn't want to falsify his speech and Frankenbite it.
Yeah, it's funny. I heard that too, and it was like I bristled. I'm sure a lot of viewers are like, ooh, and they're like, well, no, I guess it's okay because you're older and you're Asian, so I guess you're allowed to say that.
Yeah.
Speaking of identities, I have to say, as a queer woman, I really love that you didn't have like a reveal about the fact that she's gay. Like you didn't like, and then here's the wife, I love that you just sort of like, and then here's her spouse. And that was, just that's sort of like, in our movement work, that's like where we seek to get to, where there's not where she's not closeted. You're not like not including her spouse, but that you're just kind of like, it's a matter of fact, right? Like she's Jewish, she's gay, she's whatever.
Absolutely. And that was, I think, and thank you for that. Queer communities, and we've had 2 screenings really that were specifically LGBTQ film festivals, but also another community where we had a lot of representatives, of the queer community, and they said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They asked really also, how did you create a queer character as this conductor? How did you go about it? And I exactly went about it as you said. For me, I did ask her probably more questions about it than you see in the film. But in a way, as looking for the truth about a person, or this kind of condensation of truth, I didn't think that, that really she wanted to talk about being gay in a way that, it didn't really affect the film in a way, or her identity in the film, rather than just showing her as a gay woman. And this is just a normal identity for the film that she has. Now, I was also, when I get this question, is this also normal outside of the film? Sort of, was she ever hurt by somebody saying, oh, you're a gay conductor? And she actually says that people didn't dare to say that. They may have thought it, but nobody said that to her. Because it was sort of bad enough that she was a woman already.
Right. Yeah, well, that was sort of what I thought. I thought clearly, like, she was the identity that caused her the most oppression was her being a female, not her being a lesbian. Like that was, forget it. That was like icing on top.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have that scene that I love with her friends, with the community from String Fever, and where you see what it means, to be a group of lesbians and a group of friends and a group of outsiders at the time who are, and I do show that. And, we have this famous saying that like you have to show it and not tell it. In a film, it's a medium, and so we show that. I don't think she would have been comfortable talking about her sexuality a lot, and so I left that out of the film because it wasn't who she is.
Right, it's not relevant to this story.
No, exactly. So that's in a way, how we went about that.
I think there was a conscious wanting to also to be part of normalizing. It's who cares? It's part. Yeah, I'm blonde, I'm brunette, I'm gay, I'm
right.
So it was taken in that vein as well. That it is a normal part of Maren being Maren, and yes, her biggest challenge was being a female conductor. Yeah. But even the title, The Conductor, was trying to strip away. It wasn't the maestra or the female conductor.
Interesting. So say more about that. So we're degendering.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was deliberate.
So absolutely deliberate. it's a great word because it's really it's a verb, a Latin verb. Here comes the linguist again, but it's really driven by the action, and it is not gendering the agent, so to speak, and doesn't work in German. Doesn't work in Latin languages, but it works in English because it's directly from Latin, and so it's perfect. I think, because it doesn't, in fact, gender the identity of the person doing it. And we worked very hard on the title and on the title sequence with the Pentagram, the graphics. I don't know if you saw it, but
the graphics were beautiful. The animation throughout, that's what you call it, were really beautifully done. So elegant and evocative.
Yes. So we tried to make people think about the act of conducting, which is what that word, conductor kind of derives from that verb. And that's where the animation helped. So it was always about the action and not the question who's doing it. And that was sort of the politics behind the title. And it does, as Annette said, have to do with the question of identity of my subject as a woman or as a gay woman, and to make people think about what she does and not how she looks or what sexual orientation she might have.
You're saying that it doesn't work in German. So has this been translated? I mean, are you dubbing it, or is it being seen in other nations, and what's it being called there?
So, Annette, do you want to, we're screening all over the place, everywhere.
And
yeah, please go ahead.
No, I mean, different countries will, depending on the agreements you reach, I mean, different countries will use the word, and it will be engendered in some countries, I believe, but then they will lose it. But the English, the real title of it will stay The Conductor.
Got it.
We like the title to stay, and we have screenings all over the world now, and in China, Korea, and everything. And so they are sometimes asking for so they'll put in their own subtitles, but it's subtitled. And we do have a short version of the film that we made way before, but it's a synchronized version for German television, or Austrian television rather. And there they called it Die Dirigentin, because in would signify that it's a woman, Die Dirigentin. Der Dirigent would be the man. So yeah, as you say, I think that other languages are more conservative in terms of telling the viewer right away, the gender, but it's also part of the way that these languages work. And so in a way we have to work around this. But
that's part of the movements, right, of like Latinx, to try to see if we can't degender some of the language even.
I think it's really important. And for our title, it worked very well. And the title we found, Marin was at first a little, she had to get used to it.
Really? Because what was she thinking she'd be maestra, or what did she?
No. She thought it would be maybe a quote from the film,
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
Like a more poetic title, maybe, that isn't so bold. But I think the title works well. The only thing is there are other films called The Conductor, feature narrative. So, in that sense, when people Google it, but we did get a lot of good attention. So it does come up, the Conductor documentary, and it doesn't matter, I mean, you have to make the decision really for what the film is about. And because she says, I want to be the conductor, the film is really about a wish fulfillment as well as it's about the story of how the person fulfills the wish. But what she really wants is to conduct.
I found myself also thinking, when I was thinking of all the festivals this could play at, right? Like, music and Jewish and LGBTQ and whatever. And I was thinking, I wonder if there were festivals for parents, or parent, because I thought the narrative around her father, giving her, being so upset, and that she wanted to be a conductor and couldn't, and gave her the box of batons. The visual, that was so striking, to think that somebody in that generation that I don't know what gave him that idea that she could be a conductor, because that was so far from their understanding. And I thought, I hope parents see this. I thought there's a parents film festival. Did she want that to be included? Was that, because that seems like a pretty pivotal moment for in a complicated relationship with her parents.
Annette, do you want to say?
And she still has that box of batons. I think it was a really meaningful moment in her life, and that I think that absolutely having that trust, I think, is something she drew on her whole life. That in all the fights, that there was someone who believed that she could do it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I love that scene too. And I always knew I wanted it in the film, the box of baton, because it's a batons. It's a metaphor, really, as you say, for parents or for anybody who is responsible for another person or mentors another person, that the trust is part of sending that person on this journey. And, we had more stories about the father and her relationship to him that we decided not to include, so that story could really stand on its own feet and wasn't conflated with too much other information that was also entertaining and interesting about him. But we, this is because I always get asked the question, what did you not tell? And this is, for instance, more stories about her relationship to the father were not told for two reasons. One, because of the box of batons, and it's a very strong image that we get in our minds of somebody who gives her this, believes in her and sends her on the way. And the second reason is that we have Bernstein already developed as a father figure. And I thought, too many fathers are going to be too hard to swallow. So I think, we had to sort of bring the father down a little bit to make room for Bernstein.
Yeah, interesting. So interesting that her parents passed away so close to each other. And that was really striking to see that on the tombstone. Like, oh my gosh, terrible, so grim. So Annette, we were talking a little bit about travel before we started, and we were talking a little bit about how it was kind of nice to be home, but like we're ready to get back out there. And so by my count, you all went to Lucerne, Sao Paulo, Vienna, Baltimore, and New York. Did you get to go to all these fun places? Were you there on for the shoots, or
I went to many of the shoots. I was not in Brazil.
Okay.
But I was able to go to Europe, and we were in New York together, and Baltimore. Probably my favorite was going to Vienna because of it being the heart of classical music, and to really see Marin, and to see Marin entering Vienna, and with the challenges there, and going to this place that was such a big source of inspiration to her mentor. That was probably my favorite, but there were challenges all, and we also went to London, which didn't make it into the film.
Oh, okay. I was trying to catch it all. Yeah.
So
footage was beautiful. That was beautiful. That was gorgeous. What was your budget? More or less, we are coming in right around just under $700,000. That's amazing. That's incredible. That's a good value for a really great film.
Well, that includes a lot of mates rates and some still as unpaid items, including Berna and I.
Oh dear.
So it was a labor of love, but we were able to squeeze every penny that we could really onto the screen, and that was a commitment both of us made. What can we do to help Berna show her vision? And it is always one of the challenges, especially of documentary, because we're the poor cousin in the film world. But we had amazing sponsorship, and people who loved music and loved Marin got behind the film. So we were able to do it. But I'm very proud of the fact of what we were able to do with quite, it seems like a lot of money, but quite honestly, it's quite a limited amount.
No, not in the film world. Yeah. I mean, that's a shoestring for sure. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
And what made you feel so strongly that this story had to be told?
I was taken with Marin's story too. I mean, I found it inspiring. I very much want to tell female stories that have been not told. And there's still too many of those. I think that the fact that she has achieved what she has, and as Berna was saying, at the same time opening the door and bringing other people along was a really important part of the story, and an important part of why I really wanted it to be told, because she is bringing other people along. It wasn't just about achieving the apex, you know, she wasn't just getting up to the top of the mountain to look around and say, look at me, I've done this. And I think that was inspiring. And I think that it's, I thought as time went on, with the controversies that we have now, with the sort of negative feelings with COVID, with all of the animosity, as time went on, I felt even more strongly that this was the right story. I think there's a healing power in music. I think she's shown that there's a healing power that you can have in success, that it doesn't have to be at the expense of others. So that it kind of grew even more from the seed of wanting to do it initially.
Yeah, and for me, I think you know, when I first saw her conduct here in Baltimore, and I had never seen a female conductor really of that stature at the BSO, I felt sort of first a little bad that I had never asked this question, you know, of a female conductor. And we first developed the film a little bit about other female conductors as well, and other marginalized conductors, you know, and it became a film about Marin because I think storytelling, you know, wise also, we really wanted the viewer to be emotionally, like for me, why I love documentary is that you can be, you know, taking people on an emotional and intellectual journey. And so in order to be and remain emotional in the film, I wanted us to really get to know this one character. And then through her, you can look up the stories of other forgotten women conductors, such as Sylvia Kaduf, who appears at the very end. We developed her a little bit and we filmed her, but she's not in the film because, you know, storytelling wise, it just didn't make any sense. And I would say the one thing that I take away personally, and what I love the most about this story, is the fact that even if you make it as an outsider, you, to a certain extent, you still remain an outsider through your life. And I think that's in a way tragic, and also it's an important truth for us to feel and see that. And that's how we constructed the story. We always let her succeed and then have to take 2 steps back. And then we make her succeed, and then it comes to BSO. And then we see, so I wanted to show in a way also that this kind of rejection is not something that will ever, so to speak, end or heal entirely. However, you'll be able to make it better for others in the future. That's what you can do. And that's, I think, why I like the story so much.
Great.
Yeah, that's always been like the cost of her success. I remember we spoke a lot about that. You know, it cost Marin quite a bit to achieve what she's done. And I think for me, that was, you were able to show that, Berna. I found that compelling.
And that's why I showed her crying at the end when she says, you know, that she's doing it for this great passion she has. But it's also a tragic moment, you know, that she had to be rejected so many times to get there. And I just think that there's something really magical about marginalized identity in that sense, because it's an identity that is so self-aware and so delicate and so beautiful. To me, this is what I love, you know, about outsiders.
Sweet. I did, when she left, I guess it's sort of a good thing timing wise that she's maybe gone from the BSO. Yeah. Because that worked out, you know, because I was wondering, like, how are they gonna feel about this? And she's still there, but then she's I guess she just didn't renew her contract, or she decided whatever.
Well, I mean, I think that was sort of, in a way how she opened up to the BSO rejection stories when she decided not to renew the contract.
Oh,
And
gosh.
then she thought this was now a good time to actually conclude the story. But, you know, both of these things, whether going to Vienna and ending her contract at the BSO, happened while we were making the film, and were really coincidences, you know.
Yeah.
They were meant to be. But I had no idea she was going to become the next conductor in Vienna, where I'm from. So, I mean, that was really one of the funniest moments when, you know, at some point she calls me, she's like, Bernadette, you won't believe this, but I'm going to go, you know, to your people. I said, to meet my people. And then with the BSO, the same thing. You know, it was a relationship, as we show in the beginning of the film. I mean, the beginning and the middle of the film, when she tells the true story of how she became the first chief conductor of an A symphony. That was a difficult one, and it ended difficult as well, you know. And we know this from our lives, you know, that difficult relationships tend to stay difficult.
Isn't that the truth? Oh, well, thank you so much for your time. You mentioned that you've been doing lots of festivals, and you kind of answered some great questions that even I didn't ask. Is there anything else that like you want to share, like anecdotes, or like, oh, this was a good question that someone asked, or I don't know. We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we don't leave anything on the table.
What is there something, Annette?
No, I mean, I actually have to say I really have enjoyed your questions. It's wonderful talking to somebody who sees the film and kind of understands the film from the way it's been made. And so for me, I love that. I think it is, I'm always happy to hear people understand the levels of the film, because I know Berna worked very hard at getting all of the nuance on the screen.
I mean, one question that I do get a lot, and particularly maybe from Jewish film festivals, is, you know, the choice of music. Why Mahler? Why Bernstein? You know, why Auerbach, Copland? These are all Jewish composers, and so is there a reason why we chose them? And so for that, I would say the answer is that we went with what Maren was conducting, but also what I love. And I love Mahler, and Mahler was an outsider, and he was somebody who made it in Vienna until, you know, he wasn't allowed to conduct there anymore. Bernstein is very much that kind of a outside figure. Of course, he's a genius, so we all remember him, but as that, but he also, you know, had a very hard time to be seen as a composer and not just as a conductor. His most beloved piece that he wrote was Mass, which is why we put it in. So Mahler himself, about his first and second symphonies, said, you know, I've put every emotion I've ever felt into these symphonies. And we wanted to honor both Maren's favorite composers, but also composers that fit this story. So we did make a very deliberate choice to who to include. And Mahler's first symphony is sort of the bed of the film, because if you know the music, you'll see that almost everything is being used, and also the storytelling of Mahler's music is used, because, you know, there are 4 movements, and we start with the first movement, and we bring that first movement in at the very middle of the film again. And we weave all these movements around at the times that we think are right for every story told. So there's a sort of a secret, you know, score under the whole film that holds it all together. And that's what took a year and a half of editing. You know, it wasn't so much what she says, her voiceover, but it was timing it and choosing the right music to say it with.
Until it really is a character of its own that you've developed.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. Yeah, I mean, really, oh gosh, truly a labor of love. Well, thank you both for this incredible piece of art and for telling this amazing story. I'm relieved to know that Maren's pleased with it.
Yes.
So that's always a nice added thing.
Absolutely.
And thank you for spending your time with us.
Well, thank you, Liz, so much.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. So thank you to Director Bernadette Wegenstein and producer Annette Porter from the film The Conductor. Again, hopefully everyone had a chance to watch it and have enjoyed it. Once again, thank you to all of our members, our sponsors, our community partners, our volunteers, and all of you film lovers for participating in the milestone 25th Miami Jewish Film Festival. May we be in person next year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.